wearing the same shirt. Didn't plan it.
I know. It's crazy.
And,
by the way, if Fred's watching, Fred, sorry, I can't get all that stuff you sent me to work. So we'll have to talk about it when I'm there. So I'm back to the old setup.
Trey and Bernie had tons of time to prep for this show, guys. We've been on the call for at least, I don't know, an hour and a half. We've been prepping.
I got one ear working. Gotta love live. It's fun.
Oh my gosh! I can't believe you just did that on the live video. That is
it's awesome. I hope that someone keeps that somewhere.
Yeah, somebody clip that because that is the greatest start to a show I've ever seen.
Ever. I'm going to switch it up every time we come back. It's going to be in a different ear.
All right, what are we doing tonight?
Who knows? We're watching me just mess stuff up, apparently.
We're watching me win fantasy. By the way, ACL Fantasy League, this guy's got a chance. I need some guys to do some things.
I'm not going to win a game. Probably not going to. I just don't care anymore. And so I started looking at my team. I was like, man, every one of these players, these three guys are supposed to be good. They suck. And everyone else just not good. I'm like, wow.
Do you have McCaffrey?
Fun. Huh?
Don't you have McCaffrey? Oh, no.
That's one of those drafts. I was in the middle of our team. So every time I was coming back, everyone got it happened 6 straight rounds. The player I had set up, I was like, oh, this is going to be great. What is going? And it wasn't 3 people in front of me. It was always the person on each side. So it was brutal. And I just didn't pay enough attention. So
brutal.
Yeah, brutal. I finished last. What do we have to do if we finish last?
You have to drive the truck to all the opens next year.
Probably not going to happen.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. So we're not talking about fantasy football tonight. We are talking about a different type of draft. The 2024 ACL Pro Teams division is going to be incredible. Yeah, you like that? You like that? That's good. We have pro teams to talk about all night long. All hour long, we're going to dive through who's on the teams, the new format, how, the draft order. And then to end it all, we're going to go through my first round mock draft. So all of you can tell me how dumb and stupid that I am going through all these, because that is brutal. It is very difficult to do, Bernie. When you sit down,
I can't imagine.
It's going through. It's like, oh, man, I want to do a little of this, do a little of that. It's hard to do. It's hard to do.
I was talking with Wally a little bit the other day, and he was like, man, I was like, yeah, better you than me, man. That would have made my head explode trying to go through all that.
So we'll dive through all that tonight. So first, Bernie, let's dive in a little bit quickly and just talk a little bit about the differences between last year and this year when it comes to ACL Pro teams. So last season, as you remember, throughout the regular season, we simply had 7-game series. One match was essentially 7 games, and whoever won 4 or more of those games won the match, 1-0 on the win column, right? Mm-hmm. This year, a little bit different. We're still going to have a similar number of games throughout the regular season. At all the nationals, you're still going to have pro teams playing 7-game series. But this year, they're not going to be scored in matches. It's simply going to be scored in games. So if the Arizona Burn go up against the Missouri Mays and it's a 7-game series and the Mays win 5, they're simply 5-2. And that is their overall record. So it's more of a baseball type of regular season this year where you are playing these series. You are playing, instead of 3-game series in baseball, you're playing a 7-game series.
Sure.
But it's just contributing towards an overall record. And it's not until we hit the playoffs that we get these best of 7 matches to determine who advances and ultimately becomes a pro team's world champion. So that's kind of the main difference in the regular season. In addition to that, we're going to play a couple 4-game series at a couple different opens. So starting with open number 5, teams will rotate which opens that they play, but teams will put up 4 doubles teams so they don't have to travel an entire roster, but they'll play a few different games to add some flavor, some team flavor throughout the entire season, not just the pro season, April through August, but the entire year. it also will give them an opportunity to truly play in front of home fans, because we're going to make it so the teams will likely play in the opens in which they're closest to regionally. So again, trying to develop this fandom across the entire season for these pro teams. So a little bit added twist there to the format of how teams will play this year.
I love it, man. I especially love the way that it's no longer the way the series, with the way the matchups are when you're playing another team. If you go 6-1, which can happen, and I like the fact that teams are now. I think it changes the draft, don't you?
Yeah, a little bit.
I think it absolutely changes the draft, because you're going to have to really dig deep, because if that's what matters, you can't afford to go 1-6. Right. You can't have these weekends or these matchups where you're just not there because your bottom players aren't quite prepared and aren't quite, competitive enough, if you want to, lack of a better term. I mean, I think it completely changes the way these captains will approach the draft, but we'll see.
Yeah, some other added things. U18 players are now eligible for teams. They can be drafted. They can play on the teams throughout the year, so no more restriction on that. In addition to it, you also have these elite players, right? Elite now replacing the PDC division.
Yep.
Elite players are allowed to be called up to the pro team, but only the pro team that is affiliated with their state. So there's a list of affiliate states on the websites that people can check out. If you're from the state of Florida and you are an elite player, you can get called up to by the Florida Freeze to the pro team if you're in the state of Florida, if you're called up by Captain Alex Rawls. So kind of interesting little dynamic there, that some of these minor league type players are going to get an opportunity to maybe get called up to the big leagues, Bernie.
Can you imagine? Like you get this call up. I mean, it works great. I love the fact that the U18s can play. And yeah. I know you and Stacy have been working really hard on trying to get this to work out. And the fact that we get to see some of those kids in those moments, right? Especially with how heavy the youth is in our rookie class. And then, can you imagine if it comes down to an Alex Hicks and a Ryan Trader all of a sudden having to get, how important that would be for those guys to have those moments on the main stage as well. So I think that's really cool, to be honest.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun. I think the first round, we'll talk about it in a little bit. First round is going to be electric with these U18 players, I think, because not only do you get the rookies, but you get the U18 returning players that didn't get to play last year. Now they can get drafted. So, they're going to be hot commodities as well going into that first round. So, all right. And then finally, just general format. So last season you had your teams. All of the captains, with the exception of a select few, did roll over into this season. Those captains got to pick 5 players to keep on their roster. Okay. So tonight we're going to go through each one of the 16 teams. We're going to talk about who they kept. Once we go through all those teams, we'll take a look at the draft order and talk a little bit about that. And to wrap things up, we'll go with my mock draft for the first round at the end. So the first round, the order of the first round, Bernie, will be determined by the cumulative ranking of the players that came back. So if you had a lot of really good players coming back out of those 6 players, the captain plus 5, then ultimately you're going to have a low draft order. You're going to be down towards 16. If you didn't bring back the best players, then you're going to be closer to the top. So that's going to determine the order of the first round, and then rounds 2 through 10 are going to be your traditional snake draft. So round 1 is really meant to try to be kind of an equalizer, establish a little bit of parity, give those teams a little bit of an advantage, and then back towards the traditional snake draft in rounds 2 through 10.
So really not a lot for the captains to think about at all.
Exactly. No thoughts whatsoever. None. Bernie can't hear me, guys, because he's got one earbud right now.
And it's my good ear.
At least it's your good ear. Your good ear. All right, guys, we are going to take our first break. When we return, we got the first 8 teams that we want to look through as far as captains, who they took back, what they're looking forward to, and how excited they are for the season. So we'll be back right after this. Welcome back, Cornhole fans. We are talking all about ACL Pro Teams draft, and Bernie's still got one earbud. So
do it. One really good earbud.
I thought you chucked the other one. Did you go and pick it up?
No, this is just the wire, the exposed wire. I was going to jam in my ear and see how good that felt.
Yeah, don't do that, please. We'll lose Bernie's audio, and then it'll just be me for 40 minutes just talking seamlessly about it. Dear goodness. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about ACL Pro Teams. We briefly went over the format real quick. All 16 captains returning except for a select few that we'll go over. Each captain gets to take 5 players back from last year's roster. Everybody else and all of the rookies get put back into a pool to redraft on Saturday, October 7th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern on site of the first ACL Open of the season. What a kickoff to the season, Bernie. All of that in Rock Hill, South Carolina. That'll be on ACL Cornhole TV for those that can't make it out there. So it's going to be a really, really fun one. Well, Bernie, let's start going through the teams, talk about who they took back, and some exciting things. So first up, these are in no particular order, by the way. Let's talk about the Missouri Mays. The Missouri Mays are going to be led by none other than the returning captain of Ryan Windsor. Now, the Mays made it all the way to the team's semifinal. They are on the national division. They made it all the way to the finals of that national division where they came up short to the Arizona Burn. Ryan Windsor looking to repeat as another captain that took his team a very, very far way. Now, Bernie, this team in particular has an absolute stacked returning lineup, in my opinion. I'll give them to you here. Ryan Windsor is going to also be taking back Isidro Herrera, Steven Bernasette, Gavin Cano, Ethan Walker, and Jalen Jones. One of the most stout lineups that you're going to see, Bernie, for a returning group, and the Mays are poised to make another good run this year.
You know, I got to watch that. That was actually the first match I called, by the way, for teams last year. Ended up being a rematch in the finals to get to the absolute finals with the Mays and the Burn. One player off the Mays that I really enjoyed watching this season was Ethan Walker.
Yeah. I
really thought he kind of came of age. I mean, he had some moments. I mean, actually, in that last match, had some difficulty to get to that last match. But I thought Ethan played really well last year, kind of made a name for himself. And then Isidro, Isidro is Isidro, right? I mean, you know what you're going to get. The more he's dedicated, the better he is, right? I mean, I guess you could say that about everybody. But if you get a very motivated Isidro, I still think just – when he's on, he's still as good as anybody out there, I think, because he's going to put bags in the hole. But I don't know. I mean, I kind of liked it. And Ryan wasn't worried about moving things around. I think some of the captains kind of had, hey, this is how I'm going to run my team. These are the people I'm going to have play in this order. Ryan wasn't afraid to mess it up, to kind of mix it up a little bit, even though it may have made some folks behind the scenes mad on broadcast.
Speaking like you know something, Bernie. Speaking like you know something. All right, next up, we have also staying in the national division, we have the Kentucky Colonels, and they're going to be led by none other than Captain Matt Guy. Matt Guy returning as his second year as a captain. And, of course, Bernie, when we look at the players he's keeping, no surprise he's going to be keeping son Brett Guy. So Matt Guy and Brett Guy. Add to that Damon Dennis, Samantha Finley, Justin Rule, and Kimberly Glass.
Wow.
So Matt Guy keeping 2 female players out of the possible 5 that he could. This is the team that's leaning a lot on experience. There, when you add together, I mean, really the greenest player is probably a third-year Kimberly Glass or a third-year Justin Rule. So in the end, I think it's a team that is going to lean a lot on experience, especially on that broadcast court, to find some success.
By the way, before we get too deep into it, how good was Kimberly Glass at the Pro Invitational?
To end the season?
I mean, on the season, yeah. But, I mean, the Pro Invitational, just, dropping back-to-back 5s on Devin Harbaugh in that match and just had her airmail game going.
Yeah.
God, just unbelievable for her. And then, I thought this was an underwhelming team last season, to be quite honest. I thought it was
no
a team.
offense to that at all. I agree, Bernie.
that a lot of us thought were going to do some real damage that just didn't for whatever reason. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I give them one of my highest draft grades, and they just didn't perform. I was shocked. They did the same thing last year. They leaned heavily on experience, and I guess maybe they just didn't have enough leaning on talent. But I even hate saying that. It's just a very odd team and how it all shaped out.
I know we're not supposed to talk about this, right, because of what we're experiencing with teams and where we hope it goes, but there's still a buy-in issue. And I'm wondering in some ways if there was a buy-in issue with this team, with teams. I don't know. I could be 100% wrong, way off, a little bit of a feeling of that, though.
Time will tell. Time will tell. Next up, staying in the National Division as well, we have the Colorado Timber. Last year, this team was captained by Josh Holland. He did not want to be a captain again this year, so he passes the torch on to Yeti Irwan. So Yeti Irwan will be the captain of the Colorado Timber. I think it's pretty appropriate too, Bernie, as she is from the state of Colorado, so you really get that hometown feel. She will lead the Timber into the new season. So this is going to be really effectively the first real captain of the new team's format. If you go back, Cheyenne Bubenheim was a captain of the Woodchucks in that pilot year, that beta year of teams. But in the end, the first regionally affiliated female captain will be the Colorado Timber, Yeti Irwan. She's going to bring back a pretty stout list, but one kind of interesting missing piece here, Bernie. She's going to bring back Frank Modlin, Adam Hissner, Justin Doss, Eric Anderson, and Josh Holland. So very stout players. The one interesting selection was to go with Justin Doss and not return a Vincent Frisch. I did find that very interesting that Vincent Frisch did not come back, but may not have played that well in the team's format, right? Sometimes we always think about player being a really good singles player, may not be a great teams player, and yet he feels pretty confident about the team she's bringing back.
I think this is one of those teams and one of those regions where, like, I'm curious because remember the Kentucky Colonels, especially that beta year that you were talking about, and it was just like getting everybody from Kentucky they possibly could. Yes. Right. And they were going extraordinarily regional with the way they selected. I'm kind of looking forward to that, hopefully, with, say, a Timber or an Arizona Burn, where you really do start to regionalize those teams if they're willing to do that from a captain's perspective. I think it would be interesting to watch that grow.
Yes.
Right. Because, I mean, obviously, would the Timber be able to depth-wise compete with the Florida Freeze, for example, if they went very regional? I doubt it. You know, no offense to any of the players there, but just Florida is so deep. But wouldn't it be fun if some of these other regions just said, you know what, give me the pros from this area and let's see how we roll out during teams? I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, we'll see if it happens this year in the draft. Next up, we have our reigning champions. Jumping over into the American Division, your 2023 ACL Pro Teams World Champs, Pennsylvania Ringers, led by Devin Harbaugh. Harbaugh will return as the captain, and Bernie, if you look at the list here, similar to the Missouri Mays, he is bringing back a loaded crew. It is going to be Devin Harbaugh, also taking along with him Justin Burton Jr., another top 10 player, Matthew Creekiller, Gage Landis, Tubby Cobb, and Trey Hunt. Jacob Foreman was on the keep list until Jacob Foreman decided to step away and retire, at least for the temporary time frame. So Harbaugh, Burton Jr., Creekiller, Landis, Cobb, and Hunt. Bernie, that's a bunch of darn shooters.
Yeah.
Worst ranked player on the team is Trey Hunt at 104. Right. The next one is Tubby Cobb at 69. So this is a team that is talented and deep already.
So one question I had, and it's hard to question the team that won, right? Like it's hard to pick and say, well, you did this wrong, even though you won it all. I always thought that Devin and Justin should have split up and create two very strong teams instead of, because I think the way they played together, you know, it's awesome. It's going to be very hard to beat, right? But what if you do beat them and you're the other team, right? Then you've got all kinds of momentum possibly. But I think both those players being so good, and you're talking about some of the other talent that's already returning, instead of one, you know, superstar team, maybe you get two all-star teams essentially out of those guys. And I was always curious as to why they never did that.
Now, what I am interested to see, Bernie, is does the dynamic change because we're no longer going for match wins, right? Because they said,
Yes.
okay, if I'm playing a 7-game series, if I put Harbaugh and Burton Jr. together, I'm effectively guaranteeing a win.
I just need to find
every
3.
time.
No, I get it. I get it.
But now, if you're trying to go for more of a volume approach with the games, does it change at all? I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how those teams handle it. Next up, Carolina Coasters, led by none other than your 2023 Pro Singles World Champion, Jamie Graham. Jamie Graham is now a captain again for the Carolina Coasters. He is returning a pretty good Carolina Flared team here. So he is going to be taking back with him Eric Davis, Berkeley Pear, Chad Hunt, Derek King, and Trevor Brooks. Trevor Brooks wasn't able to finish the season because of the suspension, so he gets a default ranking of 100. So the rankings here were not overly skewed by a poor ranking by Trevor Brooks, just a point of clarification. But I look at that list of the 6 that are returning. 1, 2, 3, 4 are from the states of North and South Carolina. You add Berkeley Pear just over the border into Virginia. It is a very coastal flair for these coasters, and one that has a lot of team chemistry already.
So I got in a lot of trouble last season, Trey, because when we first started, I was rocking my Carolina Coasters hat. I'm a Carolinas region guy, and I caught so much flack walking around in Corpus Christi. Well, you can't wear that. You can't wear that. I was like, well, what do you mean I can't wear that? I'm a fan, and I love the way this squad was put together. You know what? This is another one of those regions that I would love to see him put together as best he could at Carolina's region, right?
Oh, yeah.
And see how that competed, because I think it would compete very, very well. So I'm interested to see how Jamie, how they work the draft. And last season, if you remember, that table was very active. That table was very into it when they were going through the draft process. So I'm interested to see how that plays out this season.
Well, let's just say this team may be already exploring some trade options for some other Carolina flair. So I'm not going to divulge too much, but this team is looking and seeing what's out there from a trade perspective.
Yeah, nice.
Next up, we have the team that is going to get the first overall pick, the Virginia Cutters, a team led by Justin Stranger, who kind of got this de facto captainship after James Washington does not compete last season. So Justin Stranger is kind of put in a really tough position. They have a really bad start to the year. No other way to put it. Just not a good team to start the year. But as much as they led the entire season with the worst record, they bounced back, Bernie, and they did not finish with the worst record. They finished with the 3rd worst record, but they really fought hard at the second half of the season. They really got some team chemistry, and they really showed some resiliency. So when we look at the Virginia Cutters and who they're returning, on paper, not the great numbers that you want to see, but we'll talk about how they're skewed here in a second. So Justin Stranger is returning Ryan Wiedenfeld, Logan Chamberlain, Leston Allen, Dakota Salee, and Michael Dingus. Logan Chamberlain is ranked 14th from last season, Bernie. The next highest, 80, with Ryan Wiedenfeld. Now, you could say, Ryan, in what world is Ryan Wiedenfeld the 80th ranked player in the world? I would probably say you're right. But the fact is, that's where he finished last season in pro singles. So I think the Cutters have a really good opportunity to steal a really good first pick, get a good, solid player, someone that's a top 10, top 15 caliber on the team right now to help jumpstart the relaunch and revive of this Virginia Cutters team.
I kind of like Justin Stranger as the captain of this team. He's a cerebral kid. He's a smart kid. I think he'll approach this in a very – he's going to think his way through this, right? This isn't going to be just, hey, we're having fun. Let's get this guy. Let's get that guy. I mean, I think he's going to think his way through this draft. And like you said, it would be hard to start as poorly as they started last season.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
It would be very tough.
So I think they have that going for them. It's a lot easier to go up than to stay up. I guess is the best way to put it. So I'm interested to see how Justin handles the captaincy. Even though he's a little younger, I'm still curious to see how he handles it.
All right, number 7. Next up on our list, we have the Florida Freeze, led by Captain Alex Rawls, who has now finished the season as the number 2 ranked pro singles player for back-to-back years. He is returning as the captain. He was one of the first players when he heard about that he got to keep some people. He set his lineup quick, and there's a reason for it, Bernie. On paper, this is the most stacked lineup as far as singles rankings go, and because of that, they are going to get the 16th, the last pick in the first round. And when you look at it, we just talked about the Virginia Cutters had one player inside the top 79, and that was Logan Chamberlain at 14. The worst ranked returning player on the Freeze ranked 62nd.
Wow.
Okay. So an absolutely loaded lineup. Alex Rawls, Cheyenne Bubenheim, Ryan Hart, Chris Kingsbury, Jeremy Frazier, and Blaine Rozier. A team that not only was really talented, but was especially talented in the second half of the season. And that should be music to the ears of a lot of the players that are fans of the Florida Freeze. They are a stout returning team.
I mean, I hate to sound like a broken record, but this is another one of those teams that if things fall out the right, the right way for Alex, I mean, you could literally just fill this with Florida players, right? Or at least stay Southeast region. I mean, there's so much talent there. I loved what I saw out of Ryan Hart last year in the middle of the season. I think he really kind of found himself as a pro. I think, to borrow along from Wally Castler, I think he had it right. He's the pro's pro in a way. And what I mean by that is so talented, so good, can beat all these guys at the elite level, just learning how to do it. Right?
Yeah.
But good enough to do it, had to kind of learn and get the confidence to do it. Chris Kingsbury, you get him on a heater, he's going to put a ton of bags in the hole. Do you just take that group and start saying, all right, I'm matching some of these guys together, or do you start, all right, who do I put with these guys and let's roll against anyone else has to put out?
Well, look, you already got one doubles team, Cheyenne Bubenheim and Jeremy Frazier.
Yeah, and
let them throw it down.
There's going to be some stuff posted about how I feel about Jeremy Frazier this season as a possible breakout player of the year. Is that leading too much information? I think because of that doubles pairing. And I think he's that guy that doesn't shy away from the top players. I think he relishes it when he gets that opportunity. So I think that's another massive get. I think Blaine Rozier came on last season really, really well, especially second half of the season. So that's a stacked lineup returning.
It is. And finally, the last team that we'll go to before our next commercial break, the Michigan Marauders. These are led by none other than Joe Niestedt, another great player. Finished a little bit slower than when he started, but Joe Niestedt, one of the best players of all last season, now could not return Jay Rubin because of the retirement. That was a big blow to these Marauders. They had an opportunity to return a really, really strong team. So they had to settle for Jordan Power, Mike Ferreira, Jeremy Schermerhorn, Chucky Love, and Trevor Kufis. So another kind of Michigan flair. I mean, you have Niestedt, Power, Love. Chucky Love is from Ohio. Jeremy Schermerhorn, like I said, from Michigan, and Trevor Kufis from Wisconsin. So they are kind of very regional as well, Bernie, and kind of a middle of the road team as far as rankings go.
We a lot of us had talked about how Alex Rawls was like the quietest number 2 ever. Don't you feel like Joe Niestedt had the quietest top 10 season ever? I mean, he did finish inside the top 10 in singles, correct? Yes. Number 10. I bet if you asked him how well he thought he played last season, he would not have put himself there. You know what I mean? Does that make any sense?
Flashes. He had flashes, especially at the beginning of the year. I think he would just be a little upset that he didn't do it as much in the second half of the season is ultimately, I think, where we'd say to be lacking. But a guy that's talented, he can hit everything possible. So, All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's half. We're going to take a break. When we return, we get the second half of the rosters to go through. And then, of course, Following that, we'll go through some draft order and some mock draft picks in the first round. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back, Cornhole fans. We are talking all through pro teams this evening as we get ready for the draft on Saturday, October 7th, 6:30 Eastern on ACL Cornhole TV. We'll all be in Rock Hill, South Carolina for that one. It's going to be a fun one, so get ready for that. We've gone through half the teams. Now it's time to go through the other half, Bernie. And let's start hot with the Arizona Burn, the team that finished second in the ACL Pro Teams World Championship. And this was an interesting one to work with in the offseason because Doug Zaft was the captain last year. We went back to him, said, you want to be the captain again this year? He said, no, Tai Lopez earned it. We've already talked. He's taking it over. He's going to lead this team this year. I thought that was very interesting. And, of course, that kind of leads me into who Tai Lopez is going to keep. He's going to keep Doug Zaft, obviously. But I thought it was interesting, the easy transition of leadership on that team. And I think it just shows what strong chemistry the Burn do have. Now, the Burn, of course, lose Bill Hadley to retirement. So the Burn are going to return Doug Zaft, Derek Holland, Jeff Reynolds, Moses Sassueta, and Florentino Mendoza, who wasn't an overly dominant player in singles or doubles, but did have a really spectacular year on the pro team side, Bernie.
I think that's a really interesting selection. But talking about regions again, here's a guy that I think would be fully invested in this team and loved that experience. I think from what I saw, I think he loved being on the big stage a couple of times. A lot of those players don't get to do that very often, and I think he's a complete buy-in guy with the Arizona Burn. So I think that's an interesting selection.
Yeah, and very, very interesting indeed to see how that will play out. Next up, we have the Ohio Aviators. This is another interesting one because the captain didn't have himself as a great last season. Noah Almanza, kind of jarring to see the 160th ranked player in pro singles in 2023 after a top 10 campaign in 2022. He does, however, return as the Aviators captain, and he returns a pretty stout lineup himself. Trey Birchfield, Fisher Hamilton, Matt Abernathy, Tyler Cobb, and Carson Getty. And remember, Bernie, Getty was drafted by the Marauders right after the draft in 2022. He was then he got traded to the Ohio Aviators, where he became a really solid player and a really good contributor to the team. So ultimately, this Aviators team has really got some high spots here, especially, Bernie, if Noah Almanza can have a bounce-back year.
Yeah, what if you get Almanza and Trey Birchfield back to who they once were, right? I mean, Almanza 1 year apart. If you get Trey Birchfield back in the top 20, Noah back in the top 20, that completely changes that team.
Well, you're
Completely
talking
changes
about a
that team.
2023 Fisher Hamilton, a
Yeah,
2022 Noah Almanza, and a 2021 Trey Birchfield.
good luck.
Yikes.
Right? Yeah. Wow. So there's a lot. That's what I'm saying. There's a lot of talent there. I mean, and I would imagine both those guys will be better than they were last year, at the very least.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to watch them and see how they play out. Next up, we have the #1 ranked player in the world going into or coming out of the World Championships. He didn't win the World Championship, but he did finish as #1, the Man of the Year, none other than Mr. Tony Smith. He will return as the captain for the California Slingers, and he's taking back a really solid lineup. I would say no real great superstars, but no, average Joes. A really solid lineup here. He's got Corey Gilbert, Nick Williams, Peter Sassueta, Travis Purser, and Alec Ryan. He has no players outside the top 100 returning. Everybody is inside the top 100, but nobody within the top 34. So he does have 35th ranked Nick Williams. So again, a solid core to go alongside the superstar Tony Smith.
I think this was the team that, at least in my mind, that showed us how a team can be better than the sum of their parts. Yep. Right. I mean, the way that they kind of bonded. I mean, whenever we had a team event last year, you could hear where they all were in the building. Right. You knew where the Slingers were. Oddly enough, it wasn't really that way during the playoffs, but going into every other game, you could hear them. They were very into it. They were very motivated. They were very together as a squad. So that was interesting and good to see that all you got to do, little chemistry doesn't hurt anybody, right? It's okay to actually get along and be there and pull for your team. And I thought they did that probably a little better than any other team last season.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. They gelled really well. Next up, we have Noah Wooten. Again, another player that probably didn't have as solid of a season as he really wanted to. This is a team that is going to have the 2nd overall pick, right? So they're getting a superstar with that first pick, right? And it's going to go along with a team that has shown flashes and has talent, but the question is, can they deliver? Noah Wooten going to be returning Cameron Belvin, shocker, Ryan Smith, Bobby Hunt, Terry Mathis, and Duncan Clemmer. Terry Mathis is actually the highest ranked player returning off that team, ranked at 27. The shocking thing for me, or not shocking, but a little bit surprising, they choose to return Bobby Hunt, who was ranked 163rd. They had other options on that team, but ultimately they go with Belvin, Smith, Hunt, Mathis, and Clemmer, Bernie.
My question about Cameron is, she's pregnant. How long? I mean, how much is she going to be available throughout the season as a player to retain? And I know that he would absolutely have to retain her because she would literally kill him if he didn't. But I mean, that's going to be an issue as we get down the road a little bit. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe she's going to have one of those pregnancies where nothing's bad and she can throw, up until a couple days before she gives birth. I don't know. But I would imagine there's going to be some days during the season where that's not going to feel very well for her. So,
and how about dealing with a newborn too?
Exactly. Yeah, that's all going to happen during that season. So, that's I don't know.
Can't wait to see the front.
Well, the same thing with Cheyenne Bubenheim. Same thing with Cheyenne Bubenheim for the Freeze, right?
Can't wait to see Noah Wooten throwing bags with the front-facing baby pouch.
With the papoose right here. Yeah.
Oh, I can't wait to see it.
That would be awesome.
Next up, we have Mark Richards, one of the best players in the world, was fighting for that MVP race, came up a little bit short to Tony Smith, but your 2022 Pro Singles World Champion, Mark Richards, will captain the Chicagoland Spinners for the 2nd straight year, and this is a team that is very interesting when you look at it on paper. So, a team, I said this around the ACL team today, a team that I'd be really excited for if it were 2020 going into 2023, a team that these players, with the exception of maybe Jordan Kimbrell, who I'll get to in a second, maybe didn't finish as high as I thought they would. So Mark Richards is going to take back Nico Morales, Tyler Poitras, Timmy Jonas, Jordan Kimbrell, and Philip Lopez Jr. So maybe Mark and Phil run it back in teams, even though they're not playing doubles together this year, Bernie.
Yeah, there are some players there that you wonder if they can kind of find their form. Tyler Poitras, for example, right? Like if you get him back to where he once was a few years ago, but that we could say that about a ton of players, right? I mean, we could probably go through a list, 20, 25 players, like, man, if that person ever comes back to the level they were at 2020, 2021, what have you, that's going to be stat. I mean, I don't know. I think this team has work to do on draft day.
He says, I think they have some work to do. Well, next up, trying to do some work themselves, the Las Vegas High Rollers, going to be captained again by Tanner Halbert, who didn't have as great of a season last year as he did in previous seasons. But the good news is, him as the captain, Tanner Halbert is going to be the 4th highest ranked player returning on that team, which is scary to think about.
Yeah.
It is Tanner Halbert. He is returning Hunter Thorne, Cody Henderson, Eric Zockline, Alan Rawls, and Kobe Costanza. A really solid team, and especially when you consider that Zockline and Costanza were 135th and 145th, respectively.
That's crazy.
That is kind of crazy to think about. This is a team that's getting a little bit of benefit from those low rankings to go up in the first-round draft order, so they're going to get a mid-pick. But in addition to that, they're returning a lot of great talent and even top 30 talent. They got, 3 of them on the team. This is scary, Bernie.
Don't you feel like Tanner Halbert's one of the ones, if you had to select 5 players going into this season, that probably feels like they have the most to prove?
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, and teams would help. And, I just think there's a player. What he finished barely top. Did he got inside the top 80? Correct.
76.
76. So there's no way in his heart of hearts he believes he's the 76th best player in the world.
No chance.
So I think you got to like it if you're the High Rollers, because you've got some players there with something to prove, and that always helps.
Always helps indeed. Next up, we have, you are a hometown Carolina Coaster. I'm a hometown New England Woodchuck. Jimmy Humans, the king of Europe. Jimmy Humans, the New England Woodchucks. He is captaining for the 2nd straight season after Trzynski said he can have it. So Humans is going to return Jacob Trzynski, Storm Hogue, Kyle Malone, Zach Scheibner, and Michael Lucas Jr. Now, interesting enough, this team kind of gets a worse rating, which means they get a better pick, a lot of which rests on the fact that they returned Storm Hogue, who is the 180th ranked singles player last season. Crazy to think about that Storm Hogue was that low. When you say names like that and then you say their ranking, doesn't it just say how deep the ACL is? I just said those names, and you're like, what is that? Okay, 10, 12, 15, 25, 35? Like, that's what the team is ranked? And it's
unbelievable that a player of that talent can finish 180 in singles.
Yeah, Humans, Trzynski, Hogue, Malone, Scheibner, Lucas Jr. I'm going to say these in order. 12, 18, 51, 98, 125, 180.
That's crazy.
You would not have guessed that.
No, that is crazy.
Yeah.
Man.
So let's see if my woodchucks can chuck some wood this year for sure.
You woodchucks? Yeah.
All right. Last and certainly not least, we have none other than the Texas Bully Baggers, led by none other than world champion Eddie Grindersleeve. He returns as the captain, and no surprise, who's he bringing back? Caleb Batson.
No way.
No way. Everybody's shocked, I know. In addition to that, he's also going very, very Southwest Conference, really very, very Texas in general. He's returning Caleb Batson, AJ Sims, Dylan Turpin, Cameron Kingfisher, and Deborah Odom. I think he threw a bone to Mom, Deb Odom. We won a championship
Team chemistry, baby.
We win a co-ed doubles world championship. We link up there and throw it down. So Deb Odom, 216th. So that really propelled them higher in the draft order. So maybe that was on purpose, used as a little bit of strategy there. But
sure.
Texas, bringing a lot of Texas and Oklahoma players right back on the team.
I mean, what can you say? I mean, I just, maybe they can get over their struggles as a doubles team. He and Caleb. Maybe they can find it. Who knows?
Deep analysis from Bernie Neighbors.
Yeah, maybe they can find it this season, because last season, wow, just struggle.
Man, yeah. Just 4 events. I was really expecting 5, so I mean, it was just kind of
just figure it out, fellas.
Figure it out, Batson and Grindersleeve. Figure it out, especially in teams.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to go through that first round draft order and then wrap things up with a little bit of mock draft action. We'll be back right after this. All right, welcome back, teams, fans. We've gone through all 16 teams. Who are the captains? Who are they bringing back? Now it's time, Bernie, to look through kind of a draft order, right? So we got to look at the first round. And again, the first round different than 2 through 10, but the first round, obviously the one that brings the most excitement. That first round going in the reverse order of cumulative singles standing. So the team returning the best individual players will pick last, and those with the lowest collective rating will go first. So, Bernie, let's just go ahead and dive into this first round draft order. And as we see right out of the gate, the Virginia Cutters going to end up with the first overall pick. Again, this is a team captained by Justin Stranger. And as we look, and we can dive into a first round mock draft here after the next break, Bernie, but honestly, when you look through this, you're looking at teams like, where is the cutoff in value? And for me, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but to me, it kind of rests in the 6 through 10 range, where I really think there's a tier drop off in the talent. So I really do think, one, we may see some teams later in the round trading to get into that first half of the round, or we really might see these first few picks really stockpiling some talent, and there's a lot of really, really good options.
Yeah, well, I'm curious to see how the rookies go, especially with the U18s being allowed to play. I'm really curious to see how the captains go after the rookies, right? I mean, because some of them might be, more, especially the Kentucky Colonels, like we've talked about in the past, how they lean so heavy on experience. And then, how many people are going to be like, look, this kid's good. I've seen him play. I know he's good. Because I felt like last year, some of the rookies got a good bend going into the draft. I'm curious to see how that plays out this season.
Yeah. So one thing that would be interesting, Bernie, to know your take. If you're the Cutters, the Sliders, or the Aviators, pick 1, 2, and 3. Do you take a chance on a rookie, or do you go with like a U18 player that you know has been there, done that? Like, are you thinking about that at all, Bernie? I mean, are you thinking about
I think you have to think of it in some regards, right? Like, I mean, if I'm going to go U18, I mean, Jake Gore just jumps off the page at me, right? I mean, I think he's going to be obviously one of the first 2 or 3 picks taken, but I think if I was a captain, I would want someone that's been under the lights. Especially if I'm picking that high, I want someone that's had some experience under the lights. Because as good as the rookies may be, they haven't truly had that experience yet. So even if they've done it in USA Cornhole, and even if they've done it in the juniors, it's still different when you're playing against other pros under the lights. Yeah, right? So I would
many chances on that big stage, right? And you got to be able to deliver and know someone that can play underneath that pressure.
Yeah.
So
that would be my first thought, to be honest.
Yeah, and then, as we look through this, I will say on paper, when I was like, who are the 3 best teams? 14, 15, and 16, Maze, Ringers, Freeze, all pretty loaded on their returning lineups. All right, this was a quick segment, Bernie, but we're going to take another break. When we come back, we're going to take a quick peek at my mock draft.
Yes, I've been reading your draft all day, man.
Reading it all day.
I've been reading it. I've been going through y'all's drafts all day. I've been going through y'all's drafts all day, and then thinking, I don't know how y'all did it, to be honest.
It's going to be fun. We'll talk about it right here in a second.
All right.
We'll be back. All right, Cornhole fans, welcome back. ACL Live, your favorite thing to do while you're watching Monday Night Football. You got it over here. You got us on your phone. You're just you're having a good time, right? Well, let's talk mock draft, Bernie. And
yes, sir.
This one was tough, right? I put together picks 1 through 16. I didn't account for any trades. That doesn't mean there won't be any, but I tried my best, Bernie, to put together who I thought would go here. So as we look through my mock draft, a lot of interesting things here, and I'll point out some of the highlights I think that some people will be excited to see. 1, Jake Gore. You have a player that was top 10 throughout the entire season pretty much until the very, very ending, and he's got experience on the broadcast court. He's got experience beating the best in the world. I mean, everything that you want out of someone – you got in Jake Gore. I think it's a no-brainer first overall pick. 2, I got Caden Allen. I think Caden is someone that has won multiple open events. He is someone that is as surefire a rookie as you can have. He's got a little bit of broadcast experience, right?
Yep.
So if I'm looking for someone to have, if I'm going to take someone else over him, then the experience must be overwhelming, and the success on that broadcast court must be overwhelming. I didn't see that. So for me, a little bit of broadcast court experience paired with a lot of open winning, a lot of success makes him a really surefire candidate. And as we look through here, I have 9 U18 players going in the first round. Sammy Soto's in there. Alex Hicks is in there. Top high-profile rookies really coming into the ACL. Really high-profile Jeremiah Ellis, Austin Cameron. You got a young gun in Braden Wilson. You have Bella Suprenant in the back half trying to make a return. I have a little bit of regional flair. Chris Roybal, Mike Jackwis, and Vincent Frisch I have all going to regionally to the teams that would regionally be affiliated with them. Roybal being Arizona, Mike Jackwis from Michigan, and then Vincent Frisch from California. So, and of course, I wrap it up with Sorrells there again, Florida Freeze. So a lot of different things coming, a lot of different actions here, Bernie, for all these different draft picks, but it was certainly fun to put together.
We talked about Jake Gordon, what an amazing season he had. Mentioned earlier, some players that we thought that are looking to have, kind of get back to what they once were. I think Jackson Gore and that pick that you have going number 4 there to the Coasters, I think he has a lot to prove. Because if this time last year, if you were to ask everyone who's the best singles player of the Gore twins at this moment last year, I think people would have said Jackson might be a little better.
Yeah, 100%.
Actually didn't play out that way. It wasn't even close to playing out that way. I think Jackson has a lot to prove. Carolina kid, I think that would be an unreal steal for the Coasters to get Jackson Gore there. I mean, and Alex Hicks at 5. I think Alex Hicks, I think he played a little better the last time he was on the broadcast court. I think every time he gets there, he's going to be better and better and better. I think it would be hard to turn away from Alex Hicks, to be honest with you, considering what he's done already in the pro division.
Yeah, I had Jackson Gore at 4. I actually like Soto better right now in their development. They are doubles partners, funny enough. Yes. But I think the Coasters saying, I got a Carolina team. I got Jackson Gore in front of me. I know what I'm getting. Give me Jack Gore right now. And I think that's why he leaves there. Yeah.
It's funny you say that about Sammy Soto. I've only been able to see him a few times. And I remember watching him one time, and I don't know who I said it to. I was like, that's a top 25 player.
Yeah.
When he cleans a couple things up, that's a top 25 player in the world. I like your number 9 pick with Ian Cripps out of Louisiana going to the Texas Bullybaggers. I think that would be a really good squad for him if it does play out that way.
Yeah,
a kid that jumped up the rankings last year, barely gets in the year before, huge scream up the rankings this year. I'm all about some Ian Cripps if he ends up with wherever he goes, but I think that would be an interesting pick for the Bullybaggers.
They already have a Texas flair, right? So, and being Louisiana in that same conference, it wouldn't surprise me to go get him. I will say, though, if Braden Wilson falls to the Bullybaggers, they will be taking Braden Wilson. I can almost guarantee it. Same thing with Sammy Soto. Neither one of them, I don't think, will fall all the way there to 9. But if they do, I think it's certainly going to be an interesting watch.
So, I mean, you've got how many? Like, you've got 8, 9 U18s?
9 U18 players, because all the players that could be eligible this year are all surging into it. And then you add into that some of the high-profile rookies that are coming in there.
Yeah. Well. How about Matt Sorrells? I mean, how about that guy? I mean, how many times has he thrown on the dock with Alex Rawls, Blaine Rozier? I mean, how many times have those guys all thrown on that dock? Seriously.
A lot. What's funny is, too, if the Freeze are probably seeing this going, look, if Sorrells falls to us, that's the steal of the draft, right? Because they know how well he's been throwing. He's kind of been under the radar so far. So, I mean, that's going to be interesting to see if he does get that far, and obviously if they do take him. So, it's going to be very interesting. All right, Bernie, that's our preview. We only went 1 minute over. We were treading heavy there for a little bit.
Sorry. I got a little wordy there at the beginning, especially going with one earbud. Kind of amazing that I was being that wordy.
I love it. I can't wait as you end the show just to rip your earbuds in half. Shut up. Yeah. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, again, first open of the year. We'll kick off pro teams on Friday, October 6th. We'll have the rookie showcase at 10 a.m. All the rookies competing in a combine-like format to get scored so that they can all showcase to those teams what they have to offer. That leads into the first open of the year, singles and doubles over Friday and Saturday, and then 6:30 p.m. Eastern live on ACL Cornhole TV on Saturday, October 7th. We will have the 2024 ACL Pro Teams Draft, where all of these captains we just talked about will be drafting all of these high-profile rookies and returning players not already on a team. It's going to be fun to watch, Bernie. Bernie will be there. I'll be there. All the cool kids will be there.
Yeah.
Everybody will be there. You want to be there too. So until next time, for my partner in crime, Mr. Bernie Neighbors, this has been Trey Ryder saying so long, and I need to go watch myself win fantasy football. We'll see you guys later.
Yeah.